The Intercontinental Hotel, here with the CEO of beleaguered and embattled Kenya Airways, if you will. People call it once the pride of Africa. The CEO, Mbuvi Ngunze, insists it is still the pride of Africa. He's cool, he's calm, he's collected. I'm trying to throw everything at him. Why? Because I'm a stakeholder. I'm a frequent flyer, and so are many of you. And we want to know, will KQ survive? Twitter handles are at Kenya Airways, at Koinange Jeff, the hashtag Kenya Airways. Mbuvi, I guess a lot of people are asking that question, and you alluded to it, but we want assurance, reassurance. Will KQ last?
Jeff, with the board of KQ, clearly we said when we announced our results that we recognize that we're in a difficult time. There's no question about that. But that difficulty we already anticipated because we started to plan for the longer term part of financing earlier. The challenge in the kind of business we're in is you can never know when the bottoming out is. Travel advisories have only started being withdrawn recently. So we're only beginning to see the beginnings of the shoots, but it will take a bit of time. So we've restructured our business in terms of fleet. We are selling some fleet. We've gone out to look for bridging finance. We are right now at the point where we are just about to start selling to our shareholders the turnaround plan in terms of saying what's the context of the turnaround plan. We're talking about what things we're going to do. At the same time, we're talking about the financing plan, which was phase 2 after the bridging plan. Now, I need to buy myself time from a financing point of view, clearly, to allow the business to stabilize and start to grow again. Because you need to fly regularly.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. You need to buy yourself time. How much time?
We probably need financing, but we will need probably 12 to 18 months in terms of just the process of turnaround, because it takes time to start driving that traction. And we need some funding for the long term. If you look at the kind of assets and the kind of structure we have, we will need some significant money, long-term debt, to allow us just to gradually come back. And it's not, I would say, Jeff, if you put it in the international context, and I think that's partly an important thing to understand, that the aviation sector, comparable everywhere else, you need that long-term debt, that long-term support, which has some element of guarantees to come out. Malaysia is going through not dissimilar turnaround. The airlines in the US, and Jeff, you know the US well, after 9/11, after the economic crash in 2008, a lot of them went through this restructure. They are being bailed out by their governments, literally in terms of guarantees for long-term operation. South African Airlines going through the same challenges. Egypt Air going through the same challenges. I'm not saying that we take for granted support of Kenyans or support of the government or stakeholders, but I'm saying because of the wider context, which is the fact that the value of an airline is not necessarily always embedded in its P&L, you've got to consider more than just the airline P&L.
Ticketing. I am flying to the US in a few days. And obviously KQ is my airline of choice, and I went to KQ first, and the prices I got, Mbuvi, almost made me faint. I went to, and I'll tell you, I went to Ethiopian Airlines after that, and I went to Qatar, which were both flying to where I want to go. They were, I'd say, 30% less than what I would have paid a KQ. Why?
Unfortunately, Jeff, the US is a bit of an unfair example. Today, the fact that I don't fly to the US, the fact that I'm not category 1, that means that I cannot even code share with a US carrier, means that I can't actually file a price to the US as KQ. I can only give you a price which is what we call an interline rate with an airline, purely, which is, it's a much higher level price, not one that I have negotiated based on the fact that I am.
Okay.
So comparatively, the US would be a different example. Tell me, if you're going to South Africa, you compare ourselves and SAA. When you're thinking about ticket pricing, you've got to think about it beyond the fact that it's just a flight, because there is the investment, there is a service. You want to get to South Africa, correct? So the comparable airline is SAA. So you'll find that we are competitive with SAA. If you want to take a longer routing, if you want to have make a stop, obviously the pricing for any airline that goes over their hub, they will price to buy traffic into their hub. So they will always discount, because the first thing they're doing is moving traffic from Nairobi into their hub and then on to that third location. So you must compare apples with apples. If you're looking for price, if you're looking to compare KQ with another carrier on a route, there's a difference. We're competitive where we have head-on competition, and we are competitive where we have indirect competition. If you're flying, for example, to China, if you compare KQ, which flies more or less direct, with another carrier that flies indirectly, you'll find that there will be some price difference, clearly. If you're comparing KQ going into Europe, into London, you compare us with BA, you'll find that it's fairly comparative. But when you're comparing apples with oranges, it's a bit different. But I understand that the whole pricing issue is a fairly talked about issue, but I'd like to maybe paint the picture on several levels. The first one is, I think there's an important thing that we've done, which is revisited our pricing. And what we're looking at is to say, we've had a lot of feedback on pricing in the past. We've said, what do we want to do? We want to come into an international level in terms of our price proposition. And that price proposition must also take into account the investment, the competitiveness that we are doing, the innovation we are doing. We've bought assets, we are investing in routes regularly. If I look at our price proposition today, if you book early, which what we structured, not dissimilar to other markets, if you book early, if you plan, you will get the best prices, and we guarantee you what is called KQ hot deals. But what you've got to do, not dissimilar with other markets, book early, book in advance.
What is that? What's the period?
Between 28 and 42 days. Typically. In some markets you'll find it will be maybe 21, but we're asking, and structurally you'll get even lower prices than before. And then what we've introduced, so apart from advanced purchase, we've also introduced other features such as weekend stay. So you get an advantage if you stay over the weekend versus if you don't. If you're coming back Monday to Friday, it's different from if you stay at the weekend. And that's a major part of structuring. The pricing points for us, we've also changed. Before you would find that the buy-up, because not dissimilar to hotels, we have different classes of tickets as you book up and the flight closes up. That's revenue management. In fact, the airlines learned from hotels on revenue management. We've closed down the differences in terms of the buy-ups for pricing.
Yeah. Okay, let me not take us as far as America. Locally, KQ, Nairobi, Mombasa.
Yes.
The ticket for my KQ flight would be twice what I would pay on, let's say, Fly 540. Why?
I don't want to compare another airline. What I know is the service that I offer on KQ. And I know the service offering, I know the investment, I know I'm flying 10 times a day to Mombasa. Guaranteed, you'll find it. I know it's jet service, I know it's on-time performance of the Nairobi-Mombasa route is plus 90%. I know that you like the check-in process, you like the crew on board, you like the service that you receive. You're guaranteed. Now, there's a cost to that investment, Jeff. I'm not saying that we don't look at our relative prices, but the reality or the competitiveness relative to other carriers, because we aim at the end of the day to be competitive. I would not be in business today if I was not competitive. But the important thing is that I have got to take you as a passenger to consider more than just purely the price that you're paying, because it's about the service offering I'm giving you.
Yeah, you call yourselves, or we call yourselves the pride of Africa. Ethiopian Airlines, which flies a lot of routes that KQ flies, especially in Africa, and is doing relatively well, I would say. I mean, they're doing. Is it because it's a government-owned airline, or how come ET is doing so well?
I think you would have to ask ET themselves, but kudos to them. I mean, all credit to them. They have done very well. We have, of course, we compete very strongly with ET in Africa. I think we have both grown the African market significantly, and I think it's been an important contribution to this to Africa. I think they're in a slightly different context than we are in terms of the exposure that they have to the kind of challenges that we've had in this market, but also the footprint that they've created is also pretty efficient. But I would really rather focus on KQ and see how can I grow KQ stronger in the ecosystem that I work in. You know, you've got to play the cards that you're dealt.
Okay, so I'm sure ET is salivating right now when they're watching your numbers, when they're watching you guys right now. They're salivating. They're saying, "That's our next market." Are you going to give them that pleasure?
You know, I aim to be competitive, I aim to be innovative, and I aim to convince the people who fly with us. I told you we carry 10, sometimes 12,000 people a day, depending on the day of week. It's important to recognize that we are flying a lot of people, we are giving solutions to a lot of people. I would like to continue to grow that. ET is competing with us, it's true. They're a good competitor. And we've got to fight for our market share in the different places that we compete.
Yeah. Has opening up Africa also affected KQ? For instance, and I remember I used to take flights to Freetown, to Monrovia, Robertsfield, to Malabo in Equatorial Guinea. I mean, all of KQ would fly everywhere and come back with everything from passengers to cargo. So now, for instance, Emirates is flying into West Africa big time. Qatar is flying into West Africa and eating into a big part of your clientele and your cargo that especially West Africans were putting on KQ. Has that affected you all?
I think it's affected everybody. I think what you must look at is to say, what's a competitive landscape today relative to 5 years ago? 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Emirates flew only to 11 destinations in Africa. Today they're flying, I think, 22, 25 destinations in Africa. Actually, Emirates is today the largest carrier of traffic from Africa to the world. Not even KQ, not even ET.
They've taken over.
So that has to cause concern.
Yeah.
But look at it a bit broadly, Jeff. Aviation industry today, we are no longer competing airline to airline. We are competing systems. The Gulf carriers are an economy. That's a reality. The center of aviation is moving to the Gulf because they have considered that their investment in Dubai, in Doha, in Abu Dhabi needs to support the rest of the economy. So they have aligned everything, policies, civil aviation, aircraft purchases, and they're in a good position. The same is happening. ET is aligned that way. China is doing the same. We've got to do the same here if we are truly to develop this hub into the hub of choice in the region and in Africa. And maybe incidentally, I'll tell you that with the Ministry of Transport and Transport and Infrastructure, in February we hosted the first ever aviation workshop in Kenya, which was about driving alignment. And so what do we need to do as a country to have the same system thinking? Because KQ will not do it alone. KAA will not do it alone. Government will not do it alone. What do we need to do to plan ourselves to make sure that we are pulling in the same direction to be able to manage the risks of the competition? Because competition is reality. But you've got to compete today as a system. You can't continue competing only as a single company. And that's where the challenge of competing against the Emirates and people like that. You know, the Americans are complaining about the Gulf carriers. The Europeans are complaining about the Gulf carriers. What do we need to do here? Not to say we have to keep competition away, but how do we manage our market to really create the competitiveness that we want to develop out of it?
The terminal at JKIA, is that helping up? The revamping, the renovation, is that helping realign?
Hallelujah. It's the beginnings. I mean, Jeff, KQ was investing well ahead of the infrastructure in this country. In fact, yesterday I was with the board of KAA. We were talking about exactly this issue. How do we make sure that the infrastructure is aligned to support the long-term growth? Today, our hub is avoided by some people because it doesn't have the just very simple amenities. The movement around the hub, the fact that we are busing people from aircraft into terminal, that creates a dissatisfaction with passengers. Passengers are used to going into a hub where, you come in nose in, you're coming out of a jetway, into a terminal, through security, into a good lounge area, etc. Those lounge facilities are significantly improved, but the ease of movement of the airport will still require some work. All credit to the government. It's investing step by step, but it's taken really time to get where we are.
Yeah.
And actually, effectively, we've lost opportunity, if you ask me.
Yeah. Second runway, when's that going to be complete?
The government hasn't actually announced, and KA hasn't said when they will do that. From my understanding, the work in terms of the scoping of the runway, all the engineering works have been done, sizing the engineering works. It's in terms of, truly putting in the money.
We had only one runway all this time?
Yes.
Goodness gracious me. All right, we're going to talk some more after break. Movie. One story I saw in Business Daily actually not too long ago is about Mirai sales, or the ban on Mirai in the UK that affected, you lost like $500 million a year or something. I'll talk about that after break. And also looking forward, how can we save this airline? I'm not saying it's going down, but I apologize if I sound like a little pessimistic, but can we save KQ? Because after all, it's us. It's part of Kenya. It's part of our whole, right? Wow. This guy's not even sweating, and I am. Why? Mbuvi Ngunze, the CEO of KQ, is in the hot seat. He's not sweating. I am. Twitter handles are at Kenya Airways, at Koinange Jeff, the hashtag Kenya Airways. Keep tweeting. Keep talking. We're going to take a break. Plenty more in a moment.